Just a second ago, Yui was saying. Hey, immortal god, come with me here. The next second, it wasn't that he took the other person somewhere else. It was that he turned this city into a living hell. The terrifying magnetic field of Yui not only lifted all the buildings and land but also smashed them together, shattering space itself. Behind him, there was a blazing light, the temperature unnaturally high, making it difficult to even breathe. My god, who would have thought that Yui, who specialized in magnetism, could summon an entire colossal sun? No one knew where he pulled it from, but it obediently stood behind him, waiting for orders. Along with that came a challenge. This sun, will you enjoy the light it radiates? The terrifying burst of power was beyond comprehension, making the god of death furious. Do you think I will let you succeed? He quickly created numerous formations, some green, some red, flickering alongside his deathly spiritual energy to counterattack. I am the immortal, the undying. I cannot be destroyed. Do you understand? He roared, his eyes behind the skull glowing with a purple hue. Two blood-red formations merged from both sides, while the god of death stood before a green formation. Suddenly, spiritual energy surged into clusters, spiraled, and then shot forward with a thunderous boom. The god of death unleashed his ultimate spell. Instant death curse. A deadly incantation that could kill in one strike. Meanwhile, Yui stood out within a green energy sphere he had created, shielding himself from the waves of dark energy hurtling toward him. A piercing, furious wail echoed in the air as death energy swept through, but Yui's protective sphere remained intact. He sat down, one hand maintaining the barrier while the other clenched tightly, producing a faint cracking sound, though he wasn't visibly crushing anything. In reality, he was using his magnetism to hurl an entire mass of earth and rock straight at the god of death's face, directly smashing his mouth. Not stopping there, he launched dozens of buildings from all directions at once. In no time, the god of death was buried under a massive collision of debris. Given the time to dodge but refusing to do so, the deity emerged from a gap in the rubble, roaring, "You cannot treat me like this! If you kill me, your daughter will die too!" The pressure of the debris visibly weakened when Yui heard his daughter mentioned. That girl knew she had been reborn, but ever since her reappearance, she had remained silent and withdrawn. Even now, standing amidst the floating debris controlled by her father, she showed no sign of surprise. Her emerald green eyes only gazed at Yui, her expression unreadable. He looked at Annie, suddenly remembering those times before the wave of spiritual energy arrived, when their father-daughter life was peaceful. Yui could still recall, under the evening sun, his daughter burying a small dog with her own hands, saying, "Life is truly fragile. I will live seriously and well each day, and when my life reaches its end." Back then, Yui naturally didn't know when Annie's end would come. Surely, his daughter would reach her final moment after him. Yet now, through the floating rubble, Annie's gentle voice called out, "Father!" Instantly reaching Yui's ears, her face, radiant as ever in his memories, beamed brightly as she said, "I'm ready." The turmoil in Yui's heart suddenly shattered. He stared at Annie. Did she not understand how much he wanted to keep her by his side? Suddenly, he remembered the night he had held his little daughter tightly, crying for hours, from the freezing midnight until the soft glow of sunrise. At that moment, all he wished for was to hold her just a little longer, to feel her warmth like his own. The cloak fell as Yui tightly embraced Annie, the daughter he had been too afraid to even look at, let alone touch. Since her rebirth, she was too precious. The moment he touched her, tears streamed down his face just like the day fate had separated them. "Annie." That was all he could say, but she understood everything. Golden strands of hair began to peel away, dissolving into light. Annie closed her eyes and whispered, "I will always love you." Resting her head on his shoulder, she vanished forever. Only a wisp of golden mist remained, floating before disappearing completely, leaving Yui alone in his sorrow. Killing the god of death meant his power ceased to exist. The daughter he had resurrected through that power also disappeared. The god of death probably didn't die, but he was sealed within a perfectly round stone to prevent him from ever using his abilities again. The sun that Yui had summoned slowly faded into the void. carrying the massive rock away. One day, the god of death would be cast into eternal darkness, waiting for something capable of truly ending him. The victory belonged entirely to Yue. He had subdued a god without much effort, completely overwhelming him. As he stood prominently against the sky, those outside the battlefield realized even divine beings could be overshadowed by the radiance of the sun. One single move had completely shut the god of death's mouth. Terrifying, wasn't it? What kind of magic was that? Nature God muttered the question into the air. As expected, no one answered. Instead, a blinding beam of light shot down, nearly hitting Nature God's head, forcing the deity to duck just in time. That streak of light Panda had just shot through, making an entrance. He immediately spun back, wielding ice energy in his right hand and flame energy in his left. Panda was more focused on this fight than ever before. He rarely unleashed his spiritual energy to this extent, using both elements at once, and when he did, he always ensured absolute precision. Ice and fire struck the nature god's face, knocking it sideways. The moment the cold hit, the scorching flames followed, burning the point of impact. Yet, it didn't seem to be enough to take down the deity. It straightened its head again, then opened its mouth wide and spewed a massive blast of fire toward Panda. Seeing Panda swiftly evade, the nature god ascended, causing the fire column to rain down, trying to incinerate Panda completely. TCH, such cheap tricks. Panda shot upward in a blur. Though small, he struck hard enough to send the nature god's head lurching sideways. The deity couldn't match Panda's speed. Each slight opening led to another punch landing right on its face. Frustrated, it abruptly opened its mouth and spewed torrents of water, gurgling and surging forth in a flood. In an instant, it transformed into a massive tsunami, sweeping Panda away. Caught off guard, the panda couldn't react in time and was dragged along. Choosing a tidal wave as a counterattack, the nature god must have assumed that Panda, who had used both fire and ice, would simply drown. Unexpectedly, Panda held its breath and covered its mouth with ease. It tried swimming against the current, but no matter what, it kept its mouth tightly shut. Oh dear heavens, this was ghost saliva. How was it supposed to breathe? Panda wasn't afraid of a tough battle, a long battle, or even a life-or-death battle. It was afraid of a dirty battle. It had clearly seen the tide spewing out wildly from the mouth of the god of nature. Up above, the two of them fought without anyone dying, but below, the elves were running for their lives as a great flood came crashing down. They all screamed in panic, but they couldn't outrun the oncoming surge, and in no time, they were completely swept away. Elves were best at fighting on mounts, but now, they were just like tattered leaves struggling to stay afloat. Even though they were allies of the god of nature, his actions made it clear. He didn't give a damn about their survival. Below, the land was nothing but water. The god of nature laughed from above. If the land is all water, then you won't be able to stand. Oh. Really? Panda replied. Then, it dashed forward at full speed, running right across the water's surface. In reality, it couldn't run on water, but with every precise step, it used ice energy to create small frozen platforms, allowing it to glide effortlessly. When it was just 10 meters away from the god of nature, Panda summoned a massive chunk of ice, used it as a stepping stone, then launched itself high into the air. With a fierce shout, it swung its leg, thunder kick. This time, no punches, just a direct kick aimed right at the god's face. Panda loved attacking this guy's face. Despite its small body, Panda's strength was overwhelming. The god of nature was sent flying, crashing into the water with a massive impact, sending shockwaves rippling through the area. Panda smirked. Ha! A brat like you thinks you can take me on? The god pulled himself out of the water. He didn't rush to counterattack but instead glared at Panda. Just what kind of abilities do you have that I don't know about? Oh? Since you're asking, I'd be happy to answer. Panda spread out its stubby fingers and counted. Other than void, darkness, and light, I've got everything else. That meant Panda could wield all 5 basic elements. Its nature was devourer. As for darkness, light, and void elements, those just hadn't come up yet, but when the time came, it would have them too, the god of nature had to admit. It was no surprise this was one of the 10 great beasts. Its strength was nothing to underestimate, even though he thought that. His tone was still dripping with disdain. The moment Panda heard it, its face scrunched up in irritation. You don't need to butter me up, dude. Your words stink like a fart, oh? So this little panda knew it was being mocked? The god burst into manic laughter, his body erupting with blazing spiritual energy, forming an enormous column of fire. His size suddenly increased, his fur standing on end, giving off a terrifying aura. Panda gritted its teeth and stepped back cautiously, its heart pounded, his power just spiked again. It seemed like another god had died, making the god of nature even more excited. He tensed his muscles, and spiritual energy flared around him, forming burning pillars before being reabsorbed. It was like he had reached out, stolen stray energy from the air, and taken it all in. The god grinned wildly. This power keeps flowing into me. Looks like another god has been killed by your people. Panda had no idea what was going on. Is this guy a spy for Earth or something? Why is he happy when one of his own dies? You're really enjoying this, huh? Panda asked. Of course. I just hope you all take down a few more of them. So? Are you one of the gods that got killed? Panda quipped. In response, the god of nature opened his mouth and unleashed a beam of spiritual energy, splitting the water into two towering walls. He let out a thunderous roar. Shit! Too fast. Panda's vision darkened for a second as it strained its eyes to track the beam's movement. This was bad. It leaped just in time, feeling an intense heat beneath it. This beam was on a whole different level from the previous fire pillars. If it hadn't dodged, it would have been incinerated. The beam continued its path, slamming into the distant mountain with a massive explosion. The ground trembled violently. When Panda looked back, a long molten scar had been burned into the mountainside. The rock had been carved away, and molten lava still dripped in places. Oh shit, it looked like a beam of light energy, but it had the destructive force of magma, yeah? This god was seriously messed up, and now that he had absorbed another god's power, things had just gotten way harder.